Hello and welcome to Daddy Issues, the podcast where we talk about father and son relationships in popular culture that make us cry. It's been a year and a half absence to all of you 20 people that have listened to this, but as usual, I am here with David Bryan. Hello David, how are you doing?
Hi Dom, it's been a long wait, but I'm hoping this will be worth the wait. I've been very excited to do this.
Yeah, all those poor people that have been hankering in the comments for another episode of Daddy Issues.
They've been clever in making them invisible, but we know they're there.
Yeah, the silent majority.
Yeah.
The very silent majority.
The members of Anonymous are going to be really pleased that this is back.
To jump straight into to what we're going to talk about today, we're talking about Star Trek.
Yes, we are.
That's pretty much it. You could probably tell from the name of the episode. We're talking about Deep Space Nine, one of the more previously undervalued Star Trek. Why did we decide to talk about this episode?
Why? We decided to talk about this episode because you told me that we should do an episode about this episode.
That's right.
Yes.
That's how the relationship works here, ladies and gentlemen. I say we're doing this and we fucking do it.
Yes, we do.
No. So, we're in the middle of, it's supposed to be towards the end of the coronavirus pandemic, but of course we're not. We're in the middle of October 2020, and I recently had to come back and to quarantine. Came back to the UK to quarantine and spent 14 days with a fuck all to do. So I decided to spend my 14 days binge watching like the one Star Trek series that I'd always been like, is it that good? Everyone says it's good. Is it that good? It's pretty fucking good, is what I found out over my 14 days. But the one episode we're going to talk about today, mostly The Visitor, is... Every time you see like a list of top Star Trek episodes, The Visitor of like whether it's original series, Next Generation, Voyager, the whole shebang, The Visitor is a constant on that. And before we get into specifics, what did you think of the episode itself when I forced you to watch it?
I was actually really surprised by how good it was, because I remember watching a lot of Deep Space Nine when I was a kid, because my mum was a big Trekkie. So she watched them all. She watched TNG, she watched Voyager, and she watched Deep Space Nine. So I kind of got into it through that. And I don't know, I'd say maybe Voyager was a fave, and Deep Space Nine might have actually been her least favourite, but that's like comparing all your children, I think, as far as she was concerned. But I don't remember sitting down and really admiring an episode at that time in my life when I was that age. But watching this time, I was shocked this was an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. When I got to the end, I thought this could have been like on stage. This could have been a play. This is beyond what I might have expected.
Yes, yeah. One of the things that really separates Deep Space Nine from the other series, whether it be Next Generation or Voyager, is that the majority of Deep Space Nine is an ongoing story. It's a constant continuation of the relationships on board and the political situation. There's a long building storyline until it reaches a climax. Whereas in Next Generation, you might have the odd two-parter episode, but it's not really building to anything. One of the things that's really great about The Visitor is that it works as like a bottle episode, like any other episode of Next Generation or the original series. You don't have to have seen any of Deep Space Nine to come into this episode. With the episode before this, I think this is season 4, episode 2 or 3, because I think episode 1 is a two-parter.
Yeah, it depends how you count it.
Yeah. But the episodes before this, the series beginning, is the introduction of Worf into Deep Space Nine. And it's some cool moments where Worf comes on and does some Klingon shit, and you're like, yeah, Worf. And then the episodes after this, like, if you haven't seen, oh yeah, Worf's here now, you're going to be really confused. But for The Visitor, you could just put it on to anyone, and I have. Just put it on and be like, it really doesn't matter. You just, it's just a father and son story, and it's gonna make you cry.
Yeah, Yeah, that's probably in the synopsis.
Yes. Well, how exactly do you want to do this? Because there's two ways that we can go through it. Number one, we can just go through the story of the episode, and talk about the different scenes and what made it great. Or we can do a brief synopsis and then just kind of discuss our thoughts and feelings through it.
Oh man, I don't know. You normally lead the way on this. I'm just here for the ride, man. I wish I had watched this. I watched this episode after you told me about it, whenever that was, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I haven't watched it again since. So you'll probably have to refresh my memory on a lot of things. But I think my memory will serve me well.
I think as well. That's one thing about this episode is that the story is great, but it's the connection between everyone that's really important. So, like, before you would watch the episode of Deep Space Nine, The Visitor, the only things you would have to know about Deep Space Nine is Captain Sisko, Commander Sisko, whichever one he is at this point. I think he's Captain Sisko by now. Captain Sisko has a son, and his son is called Jake, who is like 18 years old by this point, I think. And Captain Sisko's wife was killed in an attack by the Borg at Wolf 359. Some Star Trek nerd's going to be really pissed off with me. But his wife was killed by Captain Picard, by Locutus, when Captain Picard was assimilated into the Borg.
No way! I did not know that.
Yeah, that's the first episode.
What a crossover.
Captain Picard is assimilated by the Borg. Locutus kills... not personally. He doesn't go, where's Captain Sisko's wife? Because I, Locutus, am going to... But she's one of the people killed when Picard is a Borg. And so we meet a character who is very different to the other Star Trek captains who are... But how would you describe Picard and Janeway? Like that kind of generation of captains?
I suppose there's a great deal of... I don't know. They've all been given kind of like these monikers, haven't they? Like Picard is often referred to as like a scholar or a philosopher or a diplomat, which I guess are all good qualities of a captain. Which Janeway was a lot more no nonsense, and I suppose through the nature of the show, kind of breaking that gender ceiling as well. They kind of touched on that throughout the thing. Like, I may be a woman, but I'm still the captain. I'm still in charge, and I won't be taken lightly. So she was quite hard nosed, I thought. Whereas, I don't know. There's a bit of more of a laid back attitude about Sisko. He's not. Yeah. He kind of just takes things as they come, handles them in a calm way, and kind of it's all. I don't know. He seems to be very. What's the word I'm looking for? He's like. I think it's interesting that he has a son in the series because he's kind of quite paternal to the crew and to the space station too. Whereas sometimes he's there to yell and put people in line. Other times he's very encouraging and forgiving of people. Don't you think?
I think that sounds about right. It's one of the things that's really shines through about Deep Space Nine is that they do have much more of a connection than the other ones do. Like, if we talk about Next Generation, all of the characters are great, and they're great to see them together. But they seem like friends, but in comparison to Deep Space Nine, the crew of the Enterprise are very much, this is our job, right? Picard isn't friends with the rest of the crew of the Enterprise. Like, he'll have a good relationship with them, but the person he's closest to on the Enterprise is Dr. Crusher, because they are, like, actually friends.
What about
but he
Data?
Can't be... Well, Data's a robot. He's not friends with, other than his friendship with Geordi. But the reason that we think that Data and Picard are friends is because they're always in the movies together. All the time.
Okay. But did you see the new Picard series where, like, he kind of pines after his memories for Data and stuff?
Yes.
Maybe I shouldn't have brought it up. Maybe it's too
No,
soon.
we're going to fucking come. Don't you worry about that. Next issue of next episode of Daddy Issues. Data's a dad again. How does that work? Anyway, we'll get to that another time.
Okay.
But within Deep Space Nine, there are friends here, there are families here. You've got Sisko and his son and Jake. You've got Chief O'Brien.
Yeah.
You've got Brian, his wife Keiko and Molly. His whole family. And yeah, there is more of a feeling of a community and things on board Deep Space Nine, which makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's definitely a big, I think, a big theme of this. Having watched it through and seen, I know we're going to talk about how the show ends generally, but having seen that recently, it really does have a family feel. People come and people go, and there's goodbyes, and they're really heartfelt, and it really just feel like things change in a big way. Whereas in other series, characters can come and go or be killed, and it's just like, well, they're going to be replaced by somebody else, which I suppose happens in DS9 too with Dax, but that's kind of all entwined with that Trill kind of mythology, which I think is quite cool.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the Visitor then. So, if we go through the plot to begin with.
Yeah, go on then.
Yeah, we open intro night, the Louisiana Bayou, 80 years in the future, however long it's meant to be.
In the future from the future.
Yes, yeah. If you think Star Trek's in the future, you have seen nothing before now, because this is going even further into the future. We start with an elderly writer, an African-American man living in his house. There's a knock on his door, and this young woman comes in and says, "God, you are my favourite writer, Jake Sisko." And as the audience, we're like, what? Because this is very close to the introduction of that bit of Jake's character where he says, "I'm going to be a writer." Everyone else is like Nog, his Ferengi friend, is like, "I'm joining Starfleet." But Jake, even though his dad is, one of the most famous people in Starfleet, Jake's like, "No, writing is my passion." So when we jump into the future, we say that Jake was a writer, but as this lady explains to us, he gave it all up. And when she says, "Why did you give it up?" he says something along the lines of, "The worst thing that ever happened to a young man happened to me, and my father died." Bam! Credits. Deep Space Nine.
Bam! Credits. Daddy Issues episode.
Yeah. Yeah, if we get this into a video, we'll just have to rip that opening and stick it on the front. Yeah, it's a great opening to an episode as well.
Yeah. Is it does it go to credits from there?
Yes. Yeah.
It does. So does before the credits roll, do we get the whole, if you would come to me on any other day, if you come to me tomorrow yesterday or a week ago, I wouldn't have told you, and I just told you to get out of my house and leave. But because you've come today of all days, yes, I will tell you my story, which I've not told anybody.
Yeah, and instantly, like it's nighttime. There's lightning outside. There's a storm. Yeah. This girl comes in asking for this mysterious story, and he's like, "I would throw you out of my house any other day, but this one night of all nights." It's like, oh my god, the mystery. What could it be about? My father died.
Yeah, there's all, of course. But there's the other interesting thing. I think when the camera first shows us this elderly man, he's holding some weird canister with a needle on it, and he's just put it to his neck, right? So immediately who is this and what is that? And then he gets distracted by this woman arriving at his door, right? So there's another little nugget there that they're going to show. What do they call it in theatre about the gun?
Chekhov's gun.
Chekhov's gun, yeah, that is the Chekhov's gun of this episode.
Yes. Yeah, if you see a man with a needle, you better believe the needle's coming into play later on in the story.
Absolutely.
There's no way that's not coming up. So when we get past the opening credits, and the episode cuts between Jake, 80 years in the future, explaining the story to the young woman, and then the story he's telling in the Star Trek Deep Space Nine present day.
I was about to do this.
I'm using air quotes.
I was going to do the air quotes too.
Yeah. In the present day, the regular timeline of the series, and Jake is with Sisko. They've gone off to the wormhole. There's a wormhole in Deep Space Nine. If you haven't seen it, there's a giant wormhole. It causes all kinds of hijinks.
Maybe this is a good time to pause the episode and go to the Deep Space Nine Wikipedia and just quickly read about the wormhole and Bajor and the Cardassians and the Federation. Just get a bit of backstory, because we can't go into the whole thing right now.
Yeah. And that's why most episodes of Deep Space Nine can be like inaccessible if you just watch a random episode.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what the hell is going? What?
Yeah.
Whereas this episode does a really good job of incorporating the mythos of the regular show, but just encapsulating it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a wormhole. You'll get it.
Yeah,
You'll get it.
Is there something as well I don't really remember much of from previous Star Treks? Oh no, other Star Treks. So they all kind of on at the same time, weren't they? That they introduced a new species, a new race of aliens that we hadn't seen before in another Star Trek series, and they were like basically, besides the human characters, the most the most central species in the show. They were the Bajorans, and we'd never seen anything about them before, so they had to spend so much time, really, what's the word?
Establishing the Bajorans?
Yeah, establishing the mythology and the religion, and especially how that ends up interlacing with Sisko's story. But read about it.
Yes, yeah. Well, it will come up later in the conversation. But yeah, the wormhole is a connection between the Alpha Quadrant, where the main Star Trek universe takes place, and the Gamma Quadrant. The Gamma Quadrant. Yeah. We've been talking about Voyager too much. But yeah, and the Gamma Quadrant, which is like the other side of the galaxy, basically.
Yeah.
And it's the only stable wormhole known in existence, next to the planet of Bajor, which is being orbited by Deep Space Nine, the space station. The Bajorans believe that it's a holy site, and that inside the wormhole there are these celestial beings they call the Prophets, that are like gods to the Bajorans. But they've never spoken to them. The only person they speak to is fucking Ben Sisko. When he turns up, he's like, I'm going to go through that wormhole. And he does, and he becomes a religious figure to the Bajorans. So the wormhole, is a big deal. And in the beginning of this episode, there's some wormhole fluctuations, which is a Star Trek science way of saying shit's about to go down, and you don't need to know the specifics.
Yeah.
Right. It's like something sciencey is about to happen. Just strap yourself in and go with it.
They make it sound like a bit of like a Halley's Comet kind of thing, where this doesn't happen. It happens once every like 50 years or whatever, and Sisko is really keen for Jake to witness it because it might not happen again in his lifetime. But Jake's a little bit distracted, isn't he?
Yeah, Jake is he can't stop writing his book. And Captain Sisko goes to see his son, and it's like, stop writing your damn book. He says something like, yeah, you freaking nerd, Jake. He says that great line that's something like, if you were a writer, I would have thought you'd want to, pop your head up every once in a while and look around.
Yeah.
Like, life will pass you by if you let it, like that. Which, that concept is integral to this episode. That sentence is just the heart of this entire episode.
Yeah, that's the theme.
It's like life will disappear if you don't embrace it. So he convinces Jake. I'll read your book after we go and see this amazing event. But what happens next?
Shit goes wrong.
It does. It's a Star Trek episode.
It really does, because they're on like a little runabout, aren't they? And what's her name?
I think they're on the Defiant.
Is it the Defiant? I
think so.
Yeah, but there's barely any people on it. Like Dax is piloting. Maybe there's some anonymous deckhands in engineering. Yeah. Because what always happens is stuff goes wrong with the ship. Engineering gets sparky explosions and a bit shaky, and shit goes wrong. So Sisko is like called to engineering, or he just fucking runs to engineering. He's like, I've got to go see what's going on because I'm the captain.
Yeah, he's like, Jake, stay in your room.
Yeah,
I've got to go to engineering.
And then in voiceover, with Jake telling the story to his visitor. Oh, the visitor. I think I just got why it's called the visitor.
Whoa.
Smart. And then voiceover Jake says, any other time and many times before, when my father told me to stay put, I did. But for some reason on this day, I didn't. And I followed my father to engineering. And so Sisko gets to engineering. And of course, all the engineering guys are just knocked out or dead.
Oh,
whatever.
They're all unconscious. They
didn't have a name before the episode, so therefore they have no reason to not be unconscious. So Jake and Sisko have to fix the problem engineering styley without any engineers. And I can't remember who's O'Brien on the bridge as well, and he's giving instructions. There's like some MacGuffin they have to get in order to fix the breach in the warp core, right? Which is
Yes, yeah,
That's
because
thing
the
that
the,
happens a
fluc-
lot.
yeah, these fluctuations from the wormhole have caused some kind of interference in the warp core, and they're
Yeah.
gonna have to essentially conduct all of the energy to the deflector dish and shoot it out into space. Right,
Yeah.
so yeah, there's too much energy going on within the ship. They've got to eject as much energy as they can.
Sure.
And there's one tool. That they happen to need, and
Yeah.
Jake gets it, gives it to his dad. Cisco sticks it in, deflects the energy, and he's like, "Whew, that was a close one."
Wasn't it? Yeah. But then just when you think all is well, the warp core does some jazzy light show stuff, and Cisco gets zapped by all the energy, and Jake's like, what? What's going on? And then Cisco fucking disintegrates. He just goes.
Yeah, in
vanishes
front of his son.
in front
Yeah.
of Jake's eyes, and he's just gone. And
Yeah.
you're like, shit. Have they actually just killed off the fucking captain of the fucking... I'm swearing too much. I've had wine.
No, it's
Cap-
deserved. Cisco's fucking dead.
Fucking Cisco's dead. What the
Yeah.
hell? What are they going to do? This is only season 4,
Yeah.
episode 2.
It's season 4, episode 3. What, you can't
Yeah.
kill Cisco now,
Yeah,
but they did.
They did. He's fucking gone, mate.
Yeah,
And-
he is gone.
He's lost, right? Like they presume him dead because they can't find any trace of him, and he seems to be zapped by energy and disintegrated,
Yes,
so
yeah.
that they... And again, and not
Yeah.
a very... You kind of expect them to quickly be like, he seems to be dead, but actually maybe he's not. Very quickly, the
Yeah.
story goes, and he was dead. And
he was dead,
And
yeah.
Deep Space Nine mourned him, and they had a memorial, and people said nice things, but Jake couldn't bring himself to speak because he was too heartbroken, and you're like, oh shit, like life went on, like they just moved on.
Yeah, and that's what we realise about the older Jake, is that this is a man whose father died, like genuinely died when he was 18 years old, and has never been able to move on from it.
Yeah.
And he carries that burden and everything with him, and we follow, the unfolding events of his life as he struggles to deal with watching his father die in front of him and can't handle it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the story kind of continues a little bit further on when Jake's in bed and Cisco, what's the opposite of disintegrates?
Reintegrates.
Reintegrates, reappears, manifests.
Manifests.
But-
yeah,
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, Cisco manifests in front of him, and Jake's like, what? What was that? But he's only there for a few seconds, and Jake's convinced, it must have just been a dream. All of the other crew members on Deep Space Nine have been like very thoughtful, and they've done their best to help Jake and to help him move on and to mourn. But when he says my dad was here, they're like, oh, you miss your dad so much.
Yeah, but they kind of humour
like-
him. They
Yeah.
run scans, go maybe he was there, but there's no trace that anyone was there, and we have to
Yeah.
just assume Jake kind of imagined it in his trauma.
Yeah, but then
But then something else
it's
happens.
what. Yeah, it's like a year later, like a year. I think it's around a year later. Cisco appears again in the halls of Deep Space Nine while Jake is walking around. It's not in his bedroom. It's just out in Deep Space Nine, and he grabs him quickly. They run to the medical lab. Everybody's there. They can all see him. Everyone's like, what the hell is going on? They're running tests. They're putting like status bubbles around him to try and get him to stay integrated, to not disintegrate.
Yeah.
And everybody's panicking, and we get a really beautiful emotional moment between Jake and Cisco at that point.
Yeah, I like it. It's so sweet and heartfelt that the first thing that I think Cisco says when he's kind of gathered himself and he's in the medical bay and everyone's around him and he sees Jake, and the first thing he said was, "How are you doing? Are you okay? And how's your book?" It's like, yeah, because Cisco has no idea how long he's been gone. For him, it's been moments, and it could the vaporization in his mind happened minutes ago and not a year ago, and But I think even after he's been told that he's been gone that long, he just cares about how Jake is doing, if he's okay, and there's a moment. The first choke up of the episode comes when Jake can't really figure out what to say, and all he can do is he just feels ashamed that he gave up. Like, he had every reason to believe his dad was gone forever. It'd been a year, and the time he saw him in his room, he's just chalked up as a hallucination. And he just the shame he has for not continuing to search for his dad when clearly he's around. He's survived somehow, and he just they didn't. I like how they didn't try and fit that into dialogue. They just show it. Jake, the guy who plays Jake, does a really good job of just showing it with his face when he just breaks, and he starts to cry, and even then, Sisko doesn't offer him much of an explanation or anything. He just comforts him, gives him a hug, and kisses him on the cheek, and it's like it's fine. You did nothing wrong. It's okay.
Yeah, and then he's gone again.
And then he's gone.
Oh man, it's a heart-wrenching moment, and we get a bit of an explanation where we get all the science nonsense where we realise that Sisko isn't dead, but instead he's trapped in subspace, like a area outside of space and time, and so he's not existing out there the same way that we are. It hasn't been 1 year to him. It's just there is no time. It's both like nanoseconds and eternity, or just a matter of minutes. It's as time doesn't exist for him, it's just essentially jumping between these various points. But once again, Jake has to watch his dad, die in front of him. But the most important thing that Sisko says is to move on with your life. Right, like live your life. Don't live your life being don't live your life being ashamed of me. Go and be the man that you're meant to be. And what's kind of interesting is I think that Jake absolutely would not have done that. But we get a story moment where we say, oh, the tensions with the Klingons grew so large that we had to leave Deep Space Nine, basically. Yeah. And against his will, really, Jake is removed from Deep Space Nine and sent back to Earth. Yeah. And he has to leave the place where he thought his father was, haunting, basically.
Yeah, and there is, I think, in that moment where the Deep Space Nine kind of gets evacuated, because all the Bajorans who were there, who saw Sisko as this religious figure, and now he's gone, they take that as a bad sign that this is not a good place to be. But Jake doesn't want to leave. Like you said, he's his father is attached to this place, and this is where he wants to stay. And I think it's Kiro's like, I don't want to have to order you to go, but I think you should go. Yeah,
it's a tough moment, but after that we jump. How many years in the future? About 20 years?
I can't really remember. This is where my memory's getting patchy. You might have to fill in the gaps.
I think we jump 20 years into the future, and we see Jake for the first time as an adult man.
Yes.
So we see him with his wife. He's got married to a Bajoran woman, and they've moved into Louisiana from the home, the house that he's in for the whole episode. His oldest self is in, and it's in Louisiana because the Siskos are a Louisiana family. The Captain Sisko's father, Jake's grandfather, runs a restaurant in New Orleans, and that's a constant point throughout the series. Like, normally, Star Trek doesn't go to Earth very often, but in Deep Space Nine, they can't stay away from New Orleans. They're always there. So he's moved there so he can be closer to his grandfather, closer to his family. He's married a woman, a Bajoran woman, and he's written those books that he was always going to do, those famous books. They're incredibly well received. And Nog, his Ferengi friend, is there at the house to be like, oh, I'm doing so well in Starfleet now. Yeah. Aren't I good?
Isn't he
and
a
it's
captain?
Weird. Not yet.
Oh, spoilers.
But he's,
sorry.
Yeah, it's alright. But it's weird seeing the older actor playing Jake and the same actor playing Nog.
Yeah.
Because, the actor who plays Jake is already pretty tall. Like, he's a tall guy, but the actor who plays Nog is not a tall guy. and then seeing they've tried to give him like elderly Ferengi makeup or whatever, but it doesn't quite,
Yeah, I guess that's
doesn't
the thing about Ferengi physiology. They just age to a certain point and then don't change. Yeah, because we've seen the same actor playing Nog in like the first couple of seasons when the guy who plays Jake is sort of pre-growth spurt. He's kind of a kid. And then over the first few seasons, Jake just gets taller and taller and taller until he's taller than Sisko, taller than his dad by that point, by the time he's like 18.
Yeah.
Whereas the guy who plays Nog never grows because he was probably 30 playing like an 18-year-old. But so I suppose, there's no reason to make him older because maybe Ferengis don't really age the same way. I don't know.
Yeah,
but it
I
does
think
look funny. That's so small.
It's one of the things that's really nice about Deep Space Nine is that you have that family dynamic, but you get to see everyone get older as well.
Yeah.
And it's not like in Next Generation where you watch it and you go, "Oh God, they aged."
Yeah.
In Deep Space Nine, it's like, "Oh, they matured." Because it's a young cast to begin with, and you get to see them like come into themselves, and especially with those characters like Jake, who is a kid at the beginning, and by the end he's a man.
Yeah,
he really has grown up like that, and it's this episode is kind of has that feeling of the whole series, really, of how these characters grow and progress, which is really great.
Yeah.
But Nog is visiting his wife. We get an introduction to his wife and into Jake's life. And we see he hasn't fully healed, but he has moved on because he hasn't had any choice. He was torn away from Deep Space Nine, which is where he thinks his father's, it maybe still is if he is still out there. But there's nothing he can do. The Klingons aren't going to let him in.
Yeah.
So he can't call up, General Martok of the Klingon Empire and be like, "Dear General Martok, would you please allow me to..."
Can I just hang out where I used to live? Cheers. I won't be any trouble, probably.
Yeah. So we get a nice scene with him and his wife, and realise like the two of them are like head over heels. For each other.
They're proper in love. It's sweet.
Yeah. And just when everything seems to be going right,
what happens?
Sisko appears again.
Woo! That's after
he
Nog leaves, and then he disappears on their couch or something, right? Or on the floor, and they pick him up.
Yes. Yeah. He just appears in the house. And this is the first time that Sisko has seen his son as an adult man.
Yeah.
And they're much closer in age now. Maybe Sisko's like 5 or 10 years older than Jake.
Yeah.
But it's not much. They're much closer in age to each other at this point.
Yeah. Totally. Are you waiting? Sorry, you paused like you were waiting for me to chime in, but no, I agree.
I was just thinking about there's that great moment with. Do you remember the moment with his wife, where Sisko is introduced to Jake's wife?
Yeah, that must be strange. But again, that Sisko does it with this really strange kind of grace and acceptance of the situation. So he hasn't seen Jake in what to him has been moments, minutes, seconds, or like you say, eternity. But for Jake, it's been 20 years and he's become a man. And Sisko is looking upon his son as a fully grown adult for the first time, being introduced to his daughter-in-law. Yeah. And he's just, so graceful, like, "Oh, nice to meet you." But it doesn't take long for Jake's excitement at seeing his dad again to turn into almost like the trauma is re-emerges in him. And
the shame
of again, like he has not been looking for him. He just he just presumed that was it. He got those few seconds back on Deep Space Nine, but now he's not on Deep Space Nine anymore. He was never going to see him again, and that was it. So it's here we kind of get an idea that maybe Jake and Sisko are attached somehow with the way this whole accident happened. But yeah, like I say, Jake can't maintain his composure and again breaks down and just apologizes, and in this super sweet way, Sisko just takes him like a father does to a son, just holds his head against his chest and just gives him that comfort that a father can give his son. And meanwhile, Jake's wife is looking at this, and I think the moment you're talking about is when Captain Sisko and Jake's wife kind of just share a silent moment in each other's eyes, and Cisco sort of just nods at her and sort of waves her away and be like, "Don't worry, he'll be okay. I'll look after him." And it's it's as if there's been no, while Jake has experienced so much trauma, especially in the moment where he watched Cisco die, Cisco doesn't seem to have taken any trauma of this with him at all. Like, he is always Jake's dad, and that's just his default mode.
Yeah, he's not shocked that his son is aged or that he's married. I think the only thing he says is like, "I've missed so much. Like, catch me up." Basically, like, tell me what's going on, what's happening in your life.
Yeah, and that's when I suppose his wife presents him with the two successful books that Jake has written. He's like, "Oh, you finished them. I'm so proud of you." That's probably the moment where Jake breaks down a bit.
Yeah, and there's that great bit where I think Cisco says, "Just because I'm not around very much doesn't mean I don't want grandkids."
Yeah.
Which is just great. It is
great. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's Cisco's whole bit throughout this episode is live your life.
Yeah.
Right? Like don't hang this up on, don't get hung up on me. Go and live your life to its fullest, and I will be. I think he says, "I need you to do this, right? I need to know that you are going to live your life."
Yeah.
And it's a really beautiful and tragic moment, because when Cisco disappears again, this isn't a teenage boy who doesn't understand what's going on. This is a grown man who has the capacity to do something.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know what it is he can do, but he knows that he must do it. Despite his father saying, "Don't worry about me, live your own life," he can't put the past behind him. He can't let his father go.
No. And that's when Jake's life kind of starts to go off of the rails a little bit. That's as old Jake is telling the stories, he tells the visitor of how at that point he stopped writing, and instead doesn't he go back to the academy to study the phenomenon that occurred that day on the wormhole that caused the accident that killed his dad, and gets so wrapped up and dedicated to that cause that his relationship with his wife deteriorates, and even that doesn't really quash his endeavor. He just has to do this after having two reminders of the fact that he's given up. I think that's, for him, that was two times too many, and he had to make sure that if this ever happened again, he was ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And he goes away to learn everything he can without realizing that in trying to get his father back, he's pushed his wife away.
Yeah.
And all of that living life, like trying to be happy, keeping his head up every once in a while to look around, he's lost all the lessons that his father was trying to teach him in an obsession to get his father back.
Yeah, I guess he's justifying it to himself by saying, because I'm doing this to get my, like, for him.
Yeah.
But he
it's the most important thing.
It is the most important thing, even though he doesn't realise that he's doing exactly what his father would not want him to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm sure we can all relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. So we jump forward again, maybe I think another 10 years, to where Jake is like, he's a giant science nerd now. He's gone to the academy. He's like the galaxy's foremost expert on this one weird wormhole fluctuation.
Yeah.
And he gets the old band back together. It's like 50 years after the events of, the present day, in air quotes.
Yeah.
We get like grey-haired members of the original. Do you remember who's there?
Yeah, because I guess Dr. Bashir must have been on the original mission, because it's him and Jadzia in old people makeup.
Yeah, that weird old... And Dr. Bashir, the actor, is trying to do old man acting.
Yeah, he's trying to... Yeah,
and,
oh my God.
Yeah, and it's kind of comical. Like, it doesn't... It's like, oh, and I'm an old man.
Yeah.
And it's like, shut up, Dr. Bashir.
Speaking of comical acting, this was... I've been, like, gradually rewatching DS9, but I haven't quite finished season 1 yet, so it's just a bit of a jump forward. But when this episode first begins... or maybe it's during this weird phenomena thing, the classic quintessential Star Trek shaky ship acting, where they're like,
"Ooh, my legs are jelly."
Yeah, all the jelly leg acting in, and
Yeah.
I think Terry Farrell, who plays Jadzia, is trying to do like all the science speak whilst doing the shaky ship acting.
Yeah.
It's some of the worst I've ever seen. And I don't know if it's because I hadn't seen any for a while, but it really kind of made me chuckle. And I thought, I'm not going into this episode with the right mindset now, because what I'm doing is laughing at these actors trying really hard to make it look believable that the set is shaking, whilst delivering very challenging, what's the phrase for like, it's a sort of dialogue that's full of jargon. Thank you.
Yeah.
Man, I couldn't find the word jargon. Very jargon-filled dialogue, and like looking down at their consoles and shit whilst also it did make me laugh. But that's a bit of an aside.
It's a tough acting gig.
I bet it's super hard.
For sure. Yeah. But they get back on the Defiant again, and this time Captain Nog is flying the Defiant. And Captain Nog's like, I've got everyone together again. We've got Dax, we've got the Doctor, where the Klingons have allowed us to go up to do this experiment, because this is like 40 or 50 years after the initial wormhole spectacular.
Yeah, which like at the beginning Sisko said this only happens once every 50 years, say, so we assume this is the next instance of it happening. Yeah. But now Jake is ready. He's done all his he's done all his
he's got the crew, he's got the knowledge, he's got the weird wormhole subspace inversion, and he's like, I'm getting my fucking dad back.
Yeah.
I
can't remember how he does it.
Well, we rock up and Dax is like, I've got some more science jargon, and she's jargoning away. But I think the idea is that now that they're back and we have the same we can replicate the exact situation that happened last time. They can invert it, so they can integrate him in the opposite manner to the way that he was disintegrated, and just if they're in the same location, they can retrieve him from subspace. And when they try, Sisko starts to appear, and it's clear that it's working. But when Jake reaches to try and bring his father back into the real world, they're both torn into the white, empty nothingness of subspace, like the white eternity of subspace. They're both kind of torn there together.
Yeah, so and this is a point where they're kind of now the same age, and we get to see the first time kind of where Sisko has been or not been, as whatever you want to call it. And I think that's where the first time I think Sisko goes, how long has it been? Because he's just, every time he comes back, his first want is to know, well, how long has it been since the last time we did this? Because how else would he know?
Yeah, but this time, when they have the meeting, Jake is proud. He's full of pride. Like, oh, I'm here. Dax is here. We're all here to get you out.
Yeah.
And he expects Sisko to react with like, oh, thank you, son. Thank you for doing all of this to me. But instead, Sisko is like, what are you doing? He's like, what about the grandkids? And he's like, oh, my wife left me, but it's fine. I'm here for you. And Sisko's like, no! Were you not listening to me the entire time? And it's kind of a heart-wrenching moment, as in order to retrieve Jake from subspace, Dax and the others have to leave Sisko there in the nothingness again. And this time it's for good, I think, Jake feels, because he's not going to be alive again in 40 years. When the
next time this happens,
the next time there's one of these fluctuations, he's not going to be there, and who's going to be there to try and retrieve his dad if it happens again? It's a hard. Are you watching it while we're discussing it?
I kind of am. I've got it on silent with the subtitles, and I just fast forwarded to this scene. I'm sorry, but I told you that my memory was patchy and I couldn't remember, so I've had it on while we've been doing this, trying to keep it up in time so that I can pretend like I remember the episode when actually I'm just telling you what I'm watching.
Is your heart breaking?
And
Right
now-
about that. That's why this recording has been as long as an episode of Star Trek.
Yeah, I'm now looking at the subtitles say brackets whooshing, brackets Jake sobbing, because Jake is back on the ship with old Jadzia and old Dr. Bashir, and he's failed. He's crying,
Yeah.
and Jadzia gets up and gives him a big hug. Because I think
Yeah.
back when he was a little boy, when he was a young man, and this first happened on DS9, she was his rock. She comforted him more than anyone, and was kind of a parental figure to him, and she's still doing it now, which is kind of nice. And then we jump back to old Jake and his lady visitor in the in the future.
I guess this is, we're kind of back to where we started now. I think this is kind of the climax of the show. We jump back to the visitor, and I think Jake begins to explain, although I failed at my chance to get my father back, I was able to calculate when he would next return to me.
Yeah.
Not just for these fluctuations, but when he would appear, like with Jake in New Orleans, when they're tied together, would come next. And as soon as he calculated that, he did what his father said, and he moved on with his life. He didn't remarry, but he continued to write his books, and he's just been waiting for this day when his father's going to come back to him again, as this 80 or 90-year-old man that he is now.
Yeah, speaking of people doing old man acting, the actor who plays but I guess he's between like 40 and 60, looking fairly like the actor does. And now he's, as we saw him at the beginning and as we see him now, he's in all the old man makeup. He's got the sort of spindly Morgan Freeman silver hair, and he's doing all the hunched over, all me back, sitting down, getting up stuff. And he shows I guess this visitor person is a fan, so he's like, look over on the desk. And he has continued writing. He hasn't sent it to anyone, but because that was never the plan. It was just a new collection of stories to, like you said, live his life the way his dad really wanted him to.
Yeah. And then we begin to realise it first comes into play what
he's figured out.
Chekhov's gun needle was for.
Yeah.
He begins to explain to the visitor, I think, that his calculations show that his father in subspace is like an elastic band, and the reason that Sisko continues to appear at these different times is because the band is stretched, and then it kind of comes back together. Yeah, and those moments where he pings back is when he's there for just those seconds. But if Jake dies as an old man just naturally when his father isn't there,
right time. Oh, sorry. Yeah. No.
Yeah. When his father isn't in front of him, like manifested, then he'll just be lost in subspace forever because there's no Jake. There's no point in time for him to reappear to.
Yeah.
And so we begin to realise, well, if he's doing that, and he said earlier on in the show, if you would come here on any other day, at any other moment, I would have thrown you out. But today of all days, you have appeared. It must be some kind of destiny. We realise that the needle, Jake has poisoned himself in the knowledge that he's calculated his father is going to appear in a matter of moments. And Jake sits down on his bed or in his chair and falls asleep as an old man does, and wakes up to his father, who is now 40 years younger than him easily, sitting there like, wake up wake up Jake, what are you doing?
There's a nice moment where Sisko, we don't see Sisko reappear, we just Jake sort of he says goodbye. He sends his visitor away with his manuscript of new stories.
Yeah.
And I've just seen on the subtitles that there's a nice moment before she leaves where he says, "Do me a favor while you're reading those, poke your head out every once in a while and have a look around and make sure life doesn't pass you by." So he sends her away.
God.
Yeah, comes full circle. And then so he has a little sit down, like you say, and falls asleep. And when I think we just kind of a nice soft cut to Sisko is there. He hasn't seen him arrive, but he's just there watching Jake sleep in like a real just like peaceful way. Just to kind of
Yeah.
enjoying the moment. Hopefully not for too long, because his time is limited, and I did think that was that's
Stop
a little bit.
wasting time, Captain Cisco.
Yeah, what if that Jake woke up like Dad, and then he was just gone? It's like, oh, you mother! How long were you there?
Yeah. That's very true. That's very true. But we get a really nice conversation towards the end of the episode as Cisco realizes that his son did spend his time doing what he loved. He did live the life that he wanted to have lived, but he compromised and made changes along the way. And then once Jake explains the situation and Cisco begins to realize, oh my god, you've killed yourself.
Yeah.
For me, like, he can't stand it. Cisco can't believe that his son would have gone so far as to take his own life in order to save him. What other show ever has an emotional moment like that, where a parent has to realize that their child is taking their own life in order to, but it's not handled in a way where it's like, oh my god, suicide is a horrific, disgusting, it's like, it's not heralded as this mental health thing, or like, it's tragic, but it's accepted as, this is my choice. I'm an old man, I'm at the end of my life, and I've realized if I do this, then you will, like the rubber band, you will ping back to that first moment, because our connection is severed, and you will be pinged back to that first moment all those years ago, and we'll get a second chance to do this all over again.
Yeah. As long as you remember what's about to happen.
Yeah, remember to dodge, or whatever.
Remember to get out the fucking way, yeah.
Yeah.
He kind of, I guess he euthanizes himself to save both of them, really, because if this works, the timeline is reset, and Jake's life goes back to when he was 18 on the Defiant with his dad, about to see the anomaly from the wormhole out the window, and he still gets to live his whole life with his dad this time.
Yeah.
And his dad won't end up trapped in purgatory for eternity.
Yeah, for eternity, yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things that's so nice about that moment as well, is he's like, it's not just a second chance for Cisco. It's a second chance for both of them. And they both have this chance to live their lives together that they were kind of robbed of.
Yeah.
Before, with the anomaly. So,
but
Jake
won't know. That's the thing. Like,
yeah.
When Cisco pings back to young Jake, he has the memory of all of this. He has the memory of watching his son grow older and misspend his life before eventually seeing not the error of his ways, but before settling into who he really is, and then accomplishing something good before he dies. Now, it's weird now that Cisco has to go back to the quote-unquote present day and then raise Jake again.
Yeah.
Well, not again, because he hasn't done it, because he jumped forward, but he knows where Jake could be and who he could become. That's kind of a strange thought to sort of wrap your head around. If like, we as fathers, or if our fathers could see where we were going to end up, would that change how they raised us?
Yeah.
So I can't remember. You have to remind me. But at the end, it works. Old man Jake dies in his chair after Cisco realizes what he's done.
Yeah, dies in his father's arms.
In his father's arms, really sweet. And the old man, Jake actor, is really good at crying on cue, by the way. Like, in like the first time Cisco reappears in Jake's house after he's left Deep Space Nine and he's an adult, he does a really good cry. And then I'm just watching it now, he's doing another really good cry, and it's very touching. And Cisco's saying, Jake, you could still have so many years left. And he's like, well, if I don't do this, you'll die, like, you'll be dead, and that's it. So, Jake passes peacefully in his father's arms, and then Cisco gets pinged back to where we were at the beginning of the episode, and Cisco realizes where he is, and I think he just dives he just dives over Jake to protect him from what's about to happen, and in the same time, he dodges the thing, the MacGuffin, that's
the subspace warp core fluctuation that sent him into into subspace to begin with.
The science bollocks, But
yeah.
Oh,
and then
brackets quiet sob.
Oh, quiet sob. That's some heartbreaking shit.
Yeah, that's some heartbreaking shit. There we go. Yeah, he dives out the way of the force lightning. And,
okay. Now tell me what Jake says to him and what he replies.
Jake doesn't. He just kind of goes, "What happened?" And Sisko goes, "I guess we were lucky this time." And then he looks wistfully into the half distance. Jake says, "You okay?" And then Sisko takes his time and says, "I am now, Jake." And they have a hug, and he gives him a much bigger hug than Jake might find appropriate for that moment. He's like, "Okay, that was a close call, but you're hugging me like,
you're hugging me like you just saw me die or something."
Yeah.
As an old man.
But yeah, it's a nice tender moment, and everything's okay, and they fly back to DS9.
Yeah. And then end credits, Rick Berman, all the producers and everything.
Yeah, Rick Berman, associate producer Terry Potts, co-star Major. I won't go through the whole. All the computer voice.
Yeah. Quick, read the credits. No, it's a great end, and you're right. It's that moment where Jake's like, "Are you okay? What's happened?" And Sisko, how could Sisko ever explain the experience to Jake? Like the love that he knows his son feels for him, as well. Like the knowledge that we all want to know as human beings how much other people truly love us and care for us, and that knowledge that Sisko must have now of that they're the strength of their relationship as father and son is so strong that Jake was willing to end his own life in order to bring his father back.
But especially considering their personal story up until now with Jake's mum being killed, and so they would already have quite a close relationship as a single dad and his only son. But you do think about teenagers and how difficult they are to relate to, or you can imagine how difficult they are to relate to as a parent. And Jake just wants to do his writing at the beginning of this episode. That's all he wants to do, and even though Sisko is glad that he's doing something creative and he's pursuing his dreams, he doesn't want him to get too penned down in it, and he also wants him to live. So he might feel like he's annoying Jake at some point, and maybe he feels like Jake is not listening to him and he's being stubborn, and Jake feels maybe that his dad is being overbearing and he just needs to leave him alone. So I'm trying to think about my teenage years and how emotionally engaged I was with my dad, and whether it was clear enough to him how much I valued his love and support and stuff, or whether I was a grumpy little asshole that was ungrateful and didn't appreciate what I was being given in that way.
Yeah, I have similar thoughts to that, as well as of being a teenager, being that age, and clearly pushing boundaries that didn't need to be pushed, just for the sake of being a dick.
Yeah,
really. And that's one thing about Jake that we don't really see. He doesn't have that kind of being a dick. Maybe that's more of the Ferengi thing in this show, but I think one of the things that's so great about their relationship as well is that Avery Brooks as Captain Sisko is only the second African American, I think African American man or woman, to have been the top billed cast member on a TV show at this point. So, Deep Space Nine is Avery Brooks' show, the same way The Next Generation is, Patrick Stewart's show. But before Avery Brooks in Deep Space Nine, the only African American leading person before him was Bill Cosby with The Cosby Show.
Oh wow!
Which up until a couple of years ago was The Cosby Show was the thing, right? It was a national a national landmark in America, and now we don't talk about it at all. Which means that Avery Brooks on Deep Space Nine was the first African American. But also the portrayal there of two African American men, a father and son, and the strength of their relationship. Like, considering that this is only the second African American leading character that we have on television, the strength of his family relationships is incredibly strong, and it's a portrayal of black men that is strong but vulnerable, that is loving, that is caring. It's full of sacrifice and emotion, and it's a beautiful relationship that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something to be a little bit envious of, really.
Yeah, it is.
But then you kind of wonder if the price of that is, your mum's got to be murdered by
the Borg.
By the Borg. Yeah. So I don't think I would. Yeah. If I had the choice of a closer relationship with my dad, but the price is my mum being murdered by an alien race.
But would your mum, as a Trekkie, be like, "Oh look, it's the Borg"? Bang.
Yeah. Hopefully. So so Mrs. Sisko didn't get assimilated; she got murdered.
Yeah, I think the ship was blown up, and she was caught under some rubble. Yeah, she was. She wasn't assimilated.
People are always getting caught under rubble, aren't they? Jeez.
That does happen a lot in Star Trek.
It happens a lot to Spider-Man too, but he can get himself out of it. But he also, it's a bit like this theme of these episodes that we talk about. If you're Tom Holland trapped under rubble in Spider-Man Homecoming, you will make me cry as well. So there's a tenuous link.
Yeah, this is true. So, the other thing I made you watch just before we recorded this episode is the final episode of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
The finale, the very end. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because of what happens to Captain Sisko at the very end of all of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you've just seen it. What happens to Captain Sisko? And what is the final shot of Deep Space
Nine? Okay, yeah, I do remember this. It was less than 2 hours ago. I don't know how far to go back, but there's a big war between the Federation, who have the Klingons and the Romulans on their side, and the Dominion, who are like an evil conglomerate of aliens who have got some weird looking dudes on their side, and the Cardassians are involved, but then they kind of switch sides, and it was very dramatic. But when just as you think the war is over, like the battles have been won, but in the background, some guys that you're going to have to explain who they are. I remember Gul Gadot, who's like not Gal Gadot.
Gul Dukat, not Gul Gadot.
Yeah, the dude who played Wonder Woman.
Not the yes, yeah, Gul Dukat.
Gul Dukat, right? So he was like a Cardassian. He was in charge of the occupation of Bajor, right, as the Kardashians.
Yes.
The Kardashians. Yeah. This is my girlfriend's fault because I was watching this with her, and every time they went for Cardassia, she went for the Kardashians, and now it's stuck in my head.
This is terrible. You've got Gul Gadot, leader of the Cardassians. The Kardashians.
Oh my god.
This is very confusing.
I never had a lot of nerd points to begin with, but I'm losing them by the second.
I think I'd rather have the Cardassian occupation of Bajor than the Kardashian occupation of Bajor if I had to choose.
100%. I'd rather an army of millions of Cardassians over like the 10 Kardashians or however many there are.
The drama.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll try and do the footnotes. So the war is over. The good guys win, but in the background, some bad guys have been trying to kind of summon these malevolent spirits called the Par-Wraiths, who are kind of the antithesis of the prophets, who are they are the Bajoran kind of gods, whom Benjamin Sisko is like an emissary for. He kind of goes between the Bajorans and these prophets. So
so it's like the prophets are God. Sisko is kind of space Jesus.
He's a bit like Jesus.
And the Par-Wraiths are the devil. And Gul Dukat is there to let the devil out.
He wants to release
swarm Bajor, kill everyone, do devil shit.
And he's got a lady on his side who looks like, this is a hark back to one of our previous episodes, she looked to me a bit like the Croatian Prime Minister from the World Cup final in Russia. And I can't remember her name, but she's dressed in white and she's a Bajoran, but she's not cool. She wants to summon the Par Race 2. And
Yeah. Oh yeah, she sucks. We hate her.
we don't like her. And
No.
so her and Gal Gadot they go to the fire caves of Bajor to summon the Par Race, who are these evil spirits. And she tries to like backstab Gal Gadot by sacrificing him for the Par Race, but then it turns out the Par Race choose him as their emissary in the same way that the prophets chose Sisko. And while Sisko and the gang are all having their big goodbye on DS9 because Miles O'Brien's leaving to go to Earth, and fucking Worf gets a new job as like the emissary to the Klingons, between the Klingons and the Federation. And you know, it's a big, like, nice little to-do in the Hollow Suite in, like, a 1960s style Vegas saloon kind of thing. And it's really... They really drag it out, and, like, a crooner sings them all a goodbye song, and the whole main cast are there, Quark and all of the crew. So I kind of forgot that this other shit was happening. I was like, oh, this is a nice little goodbye, because... they're all getting along.
This is the end of the series. We're saying goodbye to everyone.
And they're like, hey Miles, where do you think you're gonna live on Earth? And they're like, I don't know, maybe Rio, Paris, and obviously Sisko's like, New Orleans is a place to be, and then Worf keeps going, Minsk. Have you considered Minsk? And he just keeps chiming in. But anyway, the shit with the Par Race in the fire caves is getting serious. Gul Dukat, yes. He kind of arises as the embodiment of the spirits, and the prophets come to Sisko in the Hollow Suite, and they tell him that he needs to go to the fire caves to stop this. So he rocks up with a big gun, and
he's like, I'm the emissary, bitch.
Yeah, but then Gul Dukat is like, I'm the emissary, bitch, and he fucking like he like force pushes Sisko's big gun out of his hands and like makes him kneel in front of him, and then the president of Croatia is like, oh, but you betrayed me, and now I'm going to try and betray you, even though I've been a dick this entire time. And but then Gul Dukat goes, no, you fucking not, and he kills her with his like fire force powers. And then Sisko takes this opportunity and he charges at Gul Dukat, and and fucking spear tackles him like Bill Goldberg into the fire caves, and they both
into the flames.
That is like these ethereal kind of infernal flames like hell, and it's a bit of a you shall not pass Gandalf and the Balrog kind of thing. They're falling into the flames, and then boom, cut to white, and Sisko is just sort of stood there in this kind of clean purgatory kind of feeling kind of place, which is just like what he looked like where he was when he was in between subspace back in the Visitor.
Back in the Visitor.
And the prophets. Can I just ask, the prophet that speaks to him, he calls her mother. Is it because they've come to him in the form of his mum, or is that just a name that he calls the prophets?
Okay.
Is that maybe that?
It doesn't necessarily matter, but it turns out that back in the past, the prophets exist outside of time, right?
Yeah.
They're not locked into time, but they knew that in order to stop Gul Dukat, they were going to need Sisko to come there and to be there, right?
Yeah.
So to make sure that Sisko would be born, one of the prophets took the body of his mother, made his mother marry and fall in love with his father, have the kid. And then once Sisko was born, the prophet spirit was like, well, there's the kid, job done, I'm out of here. And then his mother was like, who the hell is this guy that I'm married to? Who is this baby? What the hell is going on?
Wow, that's
because she wasn't her the whole time. A prophet took over her body.
Yeah.
And so he really is Space Jesus. Like
I was about to say, this is such a Jesus parable.
Yes, yeah. So we get back into the Celestial Temple, inside the wormhole, outside of time and space. And the prophets say to him, you're going to have to stay here outside of time and space. Basically.
Your job is fulfilled. The prophecy is complete. You've done what we chose you for.
Yeah.
Now,
but you're kind of a corpse.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's a weird situation. He's kind of caught outside life and death, outside time and space, but he's kind of trapped inside the Celestial Temple, which means that much like the Visitor, he's gone from the world, and he speaks to his new wife because he gets married just before the end of the season. And the prophets tell him, don't get married. Right? They say to him, if you get married, it's only going to bring misery and sorrow upon you. And the reason is, and he does it anyway. He's like, fuck you, I'm going to get married because I love her. And he gets married, but then 2 weeks after they get married, he's sucked inside the wormhole. And she's like, when you going to be out, baby? And he's like, it could be tomorrow, it could be next year, it could be 10 years. He's like, I live outside time and space, you know.
Yeah. And yet he's going to spend his non-time, he said, learning from the prophets and whatnot. But I guess it is kind of an open-ended thing, because...
Yeah, do you remember what the very final shot of the series is?
The very final shot is... leading up to the final shot is Kira Nerys, who's now a colonel. So I've jumped forward from like season 1 to season 4 to the last season. She's now the colonel, and she's now in charge of Deep Space Nine. And Nog has been promoted from ensign to lieutenant. Good for him.
Yeah.
So she's sort of just chilling out, and she's got Benjamin Sisko's baseball that he always used to play with, and she's just sort of thinking fondly. And then Jake is up on the promenade, top level of the promenade, looking out of the window into space. And Kira appears next to him, puts a hand on his shoulder, and they sort of smile at each other, and he puts a hand on her hand. And then it's long pan out through the window into space. There's Deep Space Nine in all of its glory. Credits. So the very end of the show is Jake's father is dead and trapped inside of subspace, which coincidentally is the entire story of The Visitor. And by the end of The Visitor, Jake sacrifices his life to stop his father from living an eternal life outside of existence. And yet, even though he does that, the show finishes on this bittersweet moment of, we won the war. All our characters are doing their thing. Life continues on Deep Space Nine. But Sisko, once again, is trapped outside of time and space. I don't know anyone who has been trapped outside of time and space as much as Benjamin Sisko. Not personally, no. But I'm not really on Facebook anymore, so I've probably missed a bunch of stuff.
That's good. But I think that's a really interesting ending, considering how considering the strength and the emotional resonance that The Visitor has. How much of Jake's life, the real Jake from the final episode, how much of his life do you see taking on the form of The Visitor, now that his father is once again trapped outside of time and space?
Wow. Okay. Well, I suppose...
Because is his life going to repeat the same thing that it did before, where he doesn't want to leave the wormhole because it's where his father is, and he's going to keep trying to get him out? Or what's the difference between the two Jake situation?
Well, the obvious difference being, like, in The Visitor, it's just a fluke accident. And there's no real control in that anywhere, and Sisko reappears almost at random, and with no real knowledge about what the fuck is going on. Whereas in this instance, he's fully aware of his situation. He doesn't know exactly when he'll be able to come back, if he can ever come back. But I suppose I'm imagining that after the final episode of Deep Space Nine, if Sisko ever did come back, it wouldn't be like, oh, hi Jake, I died 2 minutes ago. Oh shit, we run out of time, bye, and he's gone.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot more controlled, and he would either be back for good or he'd be back for as long as he wanted, because he's now one with the prophets as opposed to being just lost. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we're connecting too much of a fine thread between what we saw in The Visitor in terms of where he was, which was a white empty space, and where he was when he died at the end of season 7, being a white empty space, when it could just be down to budgetary things. Like we can't think of another
This is also true.
We can't think of another place to put him. And is the Celestial Temple always just a big white space? Because that
Oh,
could,
so yeah, it kind of changes depending on who's in there, I think.
okay, because they could have easily just like this was a brilliant opportunity for a good payoff, whereas like he's fulfilled the prophecy, he's fulfilled destiny, he's saved, I don't know, the galaxy by sacrificing himself to kill Gal Gadot, and I can't say it, Gul Dukat.
Do you know what it is? It's because yesterday she was just cast as Cleopatra, and people are like, I don't want an Israeli woman playing my Egyptian queen from 2,000 years ago. and people are like, actually, the Arabic part of North Africa is relatively recent, whereas Cleopatra was descended from Greek monarchy, so maybe she would have looked more European than she would, but that's a whole other thing. That's not what we're talking about, Dave. Why did you even bring it up?
Gull like seagull, do like doo-doo, and cat like a cat. Gul Dukat.
Wow, meow. Yeah.
There you go. Nailed it.
Yeah.
That's going to stuck. It's like a mnemonic. That's in my memory now. Gul Dukat. Why was I mentioning him? Oh yeah, because Cisco sacrifices himself to kill Gul Dukat. To kill the bad guy. He sacrifices himself
to kill Wonder Woman.
To kill the bad guy and reseal the Pares back in the fire caves.
Mm-hmm.
Shit. Nah, I completely lost what I was going to say. What was your question?
No, so your point was that this was Cisco's choice.
Yeah, it was his choice.
And
as far as the prophets are concerned, this was destiny. This was predestined.
Yeah.
They did everything they had to do to start him on this path by making him born the way when and where he should have been, and now he's done with what he was always supposed to do. And it's not even like he had to figure out what his destiny was. He's there dancing with his wife in 1960s Las Vegas, and he has a weird like Cordelia from Angel kind of migraine. And then he's like, I have to go to the fire caves because the prophets have told me to, and that's where my destiny is going to be. He didn't even have to, figure it out for himself. They just sort of go, put it in a sat nav, and off he goes. So it's all very predestined, as opposed to how it was in The Visitor, where it was, supposedly a freak accident.
Yeah.
But this is all part. That was all part of Thingy's Benjamin's destiny. Who knows?
Yeah. I think that's one thing I'd really like to see now that they've brought back Star Trek Picard. What I would really love to see is an Avery Brooks led, not even 10 episodes, but like a 2 or 3 episodes now, Star Trek Cisco, basically, but about the father and son relationship when Cisco comes out of the temple.
Okay.
And this moment, like in the same way that it's like, oh, Picard's now an old man and the galaxy has changed and so on and so forth. What happens now when Cisco does come out of the temple and he's come out and he's learned a lot, he has a lot to say, but the galaxy has moved on, and Bajor has moved on. Because he comes out and he's like, hey everyone, I'm the emissary. But it's a whole other generation of Bajorans. And there are some that are going to be like, oh my god, the emissary, that's...
He's returned, Second Coming, more
the
Jesus
Second Coming.
stuff.
Star Trek Second Coming.
There you go, you've got your colon right there.
I've done it. Oh, there, well, I was wondering where that had gone. That was a butt joke, I think.
I mean, we're way overdue. I mean, we should have had a butt joke in there
this is true. But that is one thing I would really love to see, is just a recapturing of the magic of The Visitor, but that continuation, like bring that episode, which is one of the top 2 episodes of the entire series, I think. The other best episode of the whole series is one where Cisco... he's having a vision from the prophets that's taking him back to 1950s America, and it's a racism episode, and that's great.
Wow,
that's a brilliant. I think in the final episode, there's a bit where he's like in a mental institution or something.
Yeah, they do like a flashback montage of all like the cast's best bits, which lasts for ages.
But is there a bit where Cisco's in like a mental institution?
I don't really remember. I can't recall.
Okay, maybe it's not that one, but Yeah, that's kind of like a continuation from this flashback with the prophets that he had earlier on. Those two episodes are absolutely phenomenal. But that's kind of what I would love to see in to recreate, is if they could recreate the magic of the Visitor with that father and son relationship as it is now, where we know how close they are, but Jake is the one that has been abandoned this time.
Yeah.
And rather than trying to get his father back, he's been waiting for him to come back. And he just never has. So when he does come back, it's a case of there is something to you that was more important than me. But when it was the other way around, I killed myself so that you could come back.
Yeah.
And you have this father-son relationship where the son did everything he could to bring his father back. But when his father goes into the Celestial Temple, he's like, I got shit to do.
Yeah, I want to read some Eternal books or something.
Yeah, I've got to learn.
But then our Jake, season 7 Jake has no idea, unless Benjamin told him, he has no idea about the Visitor.
Well, this is true. I think you could do a storyline where, because he's always keeping a captain's log, where he's got a log, and they say it's been 30 years now since the assumed death of Benjamin Sisko, and so his files have been released and declassified and whatever, like his military logs have been made available to next of kin, stuff like that. And then Jake's reading through, like, hang on a minute, what was this adventure where I was an old man and I killed myself?
yeah.
I don't remember this.
Yeah. Do you want to write this? I mean, this sounds good.
Okay, give me 5 minutes. Yeah, I'm going to get on it. But I would love to see, like, just one episode of that, or like a very, very short miniseries. I don't want like a continuing Picard Discovery bullshit. I don't want Alex Kurtzman involved. I don't want any of that. Just give me the sets from the 1990s. It just needs those two actors. It's a stage play. I want the stage play.
On the stage. Because that's Avery Brooks to a T. That's where he came from. And there was moments in Deep Space Nine when you go, there's a palpable difference between acting on the stage and acting for TV, and he blurs that line, or at least he wobbles and strays over that line all the time, and it's quite enjoyable to watch, and I do really like it. But I don't know if you saw that documentary William Shatner did, The Captains.
I haven't seen it. No,
Avery Brooks, I don't know when he made that. That's maybe less than 10 years ago he made that documentary, but he goes and visits all the Star Trek captains and chats to them. Avery Brooks is bananas. Like, he is an eccentric, very lovely but very strange man that you kind of, if he can still act, then he's one of the best actors of his generation, because from him to remove all of the Avery Brooks out of a performance would be a real challenge, having seen what he's like. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to see that. And I don't know why I always thought Deep Space Nine was my Star Trek. Mm-hmm. And I don't really know why, but like I said at the beginning, I would watch them all with my mum, and TNG kind of felt like the obvious choice. Like, that was clearly the better one, and it had, for the most part, some of the better actors and maybe some of the better stories. But I always did like Deep Space Nine, maybe because I have a bit of a propensity to go for the outlier and the one that's different from everything else, and it isn't a ship going as it's a strange new worlds to seek out new life, new civilizations, and boldly go and all that. It was set in one place, and something you inferred earlier was that about how it's got a long arc from season 1 all the way to season 7. That's one long story,
where you literally see children turn into adults.
Exactly,
like we're saying with Jake. Like, the Visitor really is like, the whole series is about Jake growing up and Nog growing up, and the Visitor kind of encapsulates the whole 7 seasons into one episode.
Yeah, you're right, it does. And that's something that I think is really is a gift about the setting of it being in one place, is that you can explore the growth of people, and not just now they've traveled to this planet, they're meeting these people. It's much more about what goes on within the station than it is about where they end up. So
Well, that seems like a natural place to bring this to a conclusion. What an episode!
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Like,
Like I said,
genuinely.
I was surprised. Like whoever, if this was like a staff writer who wrote this episode or
Yeah.
came up with the idea, like he could have pitched this to any number of TV shows or even like
Yeah.
made it into a movie, a standalone movie completely outside of Star Trek. It's a sci-fi film. Then, like if this was made in this century, like you could give it to like Ryan Johnson or someone
Yeah.
like that and just turn it into a sci-fi movie and it would have
Yeah.
held up.
Yeah. Yeah, this could easily have been the... they did like the... like Star Trek First Contact and like those Next Generation movies. If they had done a Deep Space Nine movie, it could have been this episode.
It would have
Really.
needed a lot more action because the Star Trek movies can't just be about character development and story. They need a few phaser fights and shit.
No, we're not going to get into that now. If we get into it, we'll never play. Star Trek can't even be about that anymore. But it doesn't matter. I'm not getting into it.
Well, something we need to
Yeah.
do before we stop is talk about any comparisons that we can make between these stories
Yeah.
and our own feelings and relationships with our fathers. That's something we kind of is always part of the manifesto when we started this.
Yeah.
And I wonder I wonder in your case, in your father's situation, with you have your dad and you also have your stepdad, and
Yeah.
I wonder if your relationship with your dad is there's anything you see in the relationship between Benjamin and Jake in that it's kind of a single dad-son relationship. In your case, not exactly, but
Yeah.
certainly more so than my relationship is. So do you watch any of Deep Space Nine and think about you and your dad when you look at the stories?
Yeah. I think the biggest connection with The Visitor for me is because I generally work and live abroad a lot. There's big gaps where I don't see friends and family, which is why our previous podcasts have been in different places. But it also means there's 1 year or 2 years where I don't see my parents, where I won't see them. I remember the first time I first moved to China in 2014, and then I returned from living in Hong Kong in the summer of 2016, and I don't think I video called or Skyped my family one time. That, like, maybe there was like voice calls and things like that, but the internet was never good enough, and all of the websites are illegal in China. So it's like, oh, let's keep in touch over Facebook. Well, you kind of can't. So when I did see my parents again for the first time after 2 years, it was a noticeable... I remember my mum and my stepdad picked me up from the airport, and they didn't recognise me. And I walked out, and like they were waiting for me at the gate, and I walked out of the gate, saw them, they didn't see me, I walked all the way around them and came from behind in like a pincer movement.
One man.
And I got them from behind. Yeah, and I was like, hi. And they were like, and my stepdad turned around and went, fucking hell. Because they didn't even recognise me. And that happens a lot with going away and coming back and going away and coming back, is that time period and those things that change in you and that change in your parents. And that's probably the bit about The Visitor I connect to the most, is trying... My dad is a counsellor, right? Is like that's his job, and like Counsellor Troy, and so he always is constantly doing that Captain Sisko thing, of what's going on with you? Tell me about you. Those caring moments we see with Sisko when he does reappear.
Yeah.
And it's like I am reappearing, and my dad's like, so what's going on? And so that is something that I definitely do see in our relationship. But my dad's not quite as selfless as Captain Sisko is in those moments.
That's a high bar to set, though.
Yeah. My dad will be like, "What's going on with you?" And I'll tell him everything, and then he'll be like, "Oh, and you'll never guess what." And we have a good bitch. I don't think Sisko has a good bitch, but me and my dad, yeah.
No, I don't think there's any bitching that goes on in his quarters, if I'm honest. But
yeah,
that's fine. We can't set our standards to the level of Benjamin Sisko fathering.
No,
because,
this is true.
Yeah, he's kind of written in. You'll have to tell me if you've seen more of it than I have, but I don't remember many instances where Sisko fucks up in terms of his parenting, where he treats Jake in a way that he shouldn't. Like, everything I remember is that if he's being harsh, it's because he has to, because Jake needs to be put back in line. And if other than that, he's supportive and we've talked before about a healthy version of masculinity, and how fathers can pass that down to their children. And I feel like Sisko does that very, very well. He is imposing, and he's in charge, and he has a lot of responsibility, and he's got, he's even got a big voice, and he seems like a big character. But as you mentioned before, there's sensitivity and vulnerability and love. There is nothing in him that is ashamed of love. He's always grabbing, even when he's like out on the promenade and he's the commander of a space station, he will give Jake a big hug and kiss him on the head and be like, "This is, I love you, son, and it doesn't matter where we are. This is how I feel."
Picard would never do that.
No.
Never. Like, if Picard had a son, he would never let the visage of, being the captain, would never let that drop. But for Sisko, going back to what you were saying earlier on about how Sisko gives off that more relaxed kind of command attitude.
Yeah.
He's very aware that this is, a place that people live on Deep Space Nine. And yes, he's the commander, but he's more like the mayor than he is like
that's a good analogy,
a military official. Like, he does all the military stuff, but really he's there, because he's got to take care of people, and it's not about fighting wars or staying alive. It's about caring for the community and making sure the community thrives, and people need to know that they can trust in him. And he kind of shows that he's compassionate with his son, and he's compassionate with others as well.
Yeah.
And it's a good character, really good character.
It is a good character, and I wonder if that's something that when I was talking about why DS9 felt like my Star Trek, but I don't know why. Maybe that's a part of it, because the focus of the shows are always the captain, really, and his relationships with all the people around him. And I feel like I could probably relate to Sisko more than I can relate to anybody else. Like, Picard is intimidatingly intelligent, and I can never relate to that. And Janeway is feisty, and she's almost like a warrior in a officer's uniform, kind of in her mentality. And she's also kind of like got that kind of maybe the phrase is not flattering, but like a tiger mother kind of thing about her crew and how she treats them, which again is great, but I can't relate to that. Whereas a kind of composed enforcement of the rules and stuff, I can maybe relate to, both in how I feel about leadership, and also I think I can probably see my dad being closest to Sisko if I was to compare all of the captains, even if you want to go into the Bakula days. I don't really which my mum also watched, but I couldn't really get into it.
Well, it's Captain Archer. He's my great grandson.
Yeah, he's your namesake, so you had to pay some attention to him.
But
no, I'm thinking maybe I could see I have a predisposed attraction to that kind of leadership and patriarchy.
I think that's perfect, right?
I like that. I got to use patriarchy. That felt good. That was nice.
But not in a necessarily negative context.
Not in like a fuck the patriarchy way.
No, but in a sense of like an actual loving, compassionate masculinity.
Yeah, Sisko is Mufasa, except not quite as hypocritical and slightly tyrannical. He doesn't have
Yes, yeah, yeah. The good Mufasa, the ideal Mufasa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Episode
Well, I
one
think that.
throwback.
Yeah. All right, we're going back to the Lion King.
Everything does.
I think that's a good place for us to bring it to a close for
Sure.
today. Do you have any idea what you'd like to talk about next?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because every time we say, what should we do next time? That is invariably not the thing we do next time. Regardless of how long
that's the game.
That's the game. I didn't know. I didn't come into this with any ideas for the next one. I was super psyched to do this again. And I think it took me. I was rusty in the beginning, but hopefully I gained some momentum and I wasn't too dull. But
No, you just
I
you lacked
enjoyed
some
it.
match fitness, but you gotta.
I did.
I've been playing too much Football Manager.
You know, I've been playing Football Manager too, and we'll talk about that off pod because it's not healthy,
Well,
but it's fun.
The other thing that if we mention it now, we will have to do is the other podcast that you want to do, which is a musical podcast idea that you've come up with, that you want to start recording. That I insist I be the first person to appear on it. That's
That's
insist-
fine.
I insist upon that. But have you come up with a name for it yet?
I'm not set. So this is kind of
But you have to decide right now, because if we tell people that this is a thing that exists and then you've changed the name,
well, it doesn't exist yet. I've not done anything, but the idea is to talk to people. I think that the idea is to more just record conversations with people, and if I end up putting them out one day, then that's great. But it's just kind of like a bit of therapy to me, a little bit, because I love music. Like, music is something I love more than even Star Trek, if you can believe that.
what?
But I try really hard to. This is not going to be a quick plug. Sorry, this should have been a really quick fire plug. But I try really hard to appreciate other people's taste in music, because I like all sorts of things, and I want to be the kind of person that if someone tells me that they like a certain kind of music or a certain band or a song that I don't like, I can be like, cool, man, like whatever you like. And that's what I want to be. But my initial reaction is normally, if I think that thing that they like is not good, I feel judgmental, and I don't want to do that. So in an effort to kind of to heal and better myself, I want to talk to people about the music that they love and why, in an effort to kind of empathize more and try and understand my friends and family through the music that they really care about. So I'll be very happy to sit down with you one day and talk about the music that you love, and I'd like to, and many more of my friends and family I'd like to do this with. And if one day I put this out, hopefully it will be as part of a wider network of music related podcasts, which currently the working umbrella title is The Jukebox.
Oh, very nice. There we go.
The Jukebox. So maybe one day look out for The Jukebox, and there'll be, I think, different kind of shows underneath that. But yeah, that's my ongoing project at the moment.
Well, we're gonna do it tomorrow.
I'd love to.
We're just gonna do it. There's no hanging around. We're just gonna do it.
All right. Well, I know it's late, but fuck it. Let's just pause this.
Yeah, keep it
And then
rolling.
I'll
Keep
make
it
some
rolling.
coffee, and then we'll just go straight into it.
Works for me.
All night long, baby.
Well, keep an eye out for the Jukebox, people, and also whatever the hell we decide to do next. We need something vulnerable. We need some dads.
We do, yeah.
If anyone has an idea of dads, leave it in the comments as always, and like, share, subscribe. I guess that's what people do.
Yeah, I think you're supposed to tell people to do that, from what I understand.
Yeah. So go love your dad. Be vulnerable with your parents. Treat them respectfully. Don't kill yourself to bring them back from subspace. That's only for Jake Sisko.
It's the one time it worked.
Yeah, it only worked one time, folks. So don't you go trying to recreate the Visitor. But yeah, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Goodbye.